Thanks so much to everyone for joining us for our first session of the UNLV Alumni Leadership Speaker Series. We are so excited to welcome all of you to participate in today's program, and we hope that you really enjoy this partnership. This is co-hosted by UNLV Career Services and the Alumni Association. Can you flip to the next slide? Perfect. So before we get started, we do want to go over a couple of virtual communal agreements just to make sure that today is really productive for everybody. So we ask that our participants go ahead and mute your microphone. That'll just make sure that the sound quality stays really good and that there's no echoing or feedback. You can go ahead and turn on the closed captioning. That'll make sure that you can catch every word of everything that Gina is going to be telling us today. It transcribes it, so just in case there's any sound issues on your part. You may choose to keep your video on or off as a participant, but Gina, our presenter today, will be using both her audio and video and showing you this lovely slideshow. If you have any questions that you'd like to ask, feel free to do so via the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. I will be asking her a selection of questions at the end of this, so if there's anything that you want me to ask, just go ahead and drop it in there and I will work it into the program if it's applicable. And to make everyone aware, we are recording this presentation for use on the UNLV Career Services website and for social media and future use. So with that, I want to go ahead and introduce our presenter for today, Gina Bongiovi. Gina is joining us today to speak on why a winding path isn't the wrong one. Gina is managing partner of Bongiovi Law Firm, a boutique firm that provides on-demand outside counsel services to businesses of all sizes. In 2005, Gina started a marketing company and, in need of legal advice, couldn't find a lawyer that was willing or able to help a startup like hers. After hearing similar stories from other entrepreneurs, she decided to dedicate her practice to serving startups and small businesses. Over the last 10 years, her firm has grown with its clients to serve businesses of all sizes from one owner to 100, and from those without in-house legal to those whose legal departments need to offload some work. Its attorneys pair business education with real-world experience to provide clients with business-minded legal advice that addresses all facets of business ownership. Gina has helped found several nonprofits: Dress for Success, Southern Nevada, Vegas Shepherd Rescue, Working Canine Rescue, and is working on others as well. She has served on the UNLV Alumni Association board, is former chair of Vegas Young Professionals Advisory Council. In addition, she currently serves on the Dean's Advisory Boards for the Lee Business School and UNLV Honors College and the Vegas Chamber Board of Trustees as chair-elect. She's been honored as a Woman of Distinction by NAWBO, recognized as a Rising Star of Business by Las Vegas Business Press, listed among the legal elite for 5 years running, awarded the International Women's Forum Carolyn Sparks Founders Award, was named UNLV's MBA Alumnus of the Year in 2005, and will be named the Lee Business School Alumnus of the Year for this year. With all of those accolades, I hope that you can join me in excitedly welcoming Gina Bongiovi as our speaker today for her content called Why a Winding Path Isn't the Wrong One. Gina, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. So, every time you think it's awkward to hear your bio being read, it doesn't get any easier when it's virtual. So thank you very much for listening to that, because it kind of gives some insight into where I am today. So I was one of the faces of the Stop the Margin Tax campaign, which was a few years ago, on the Alumni Association board, honored by the business school, but none of that was really in the plan. So here I am at my law school graduation, and if you notice, I have a somewhat uncomfortable smile. And it's basically because I really believe that I had made a huge mistake. So when you're looking at the brochures and things in particular in law school, they really make it look like your life is going to be something like this. Rolling in the dough, you're just deliriously happy. When in reality, so I was going to the UNLV Law School. So I actually got my undergraduate degree at UNLV as well. I graduated with a marketing degree from the Honors College, and I had a network here in Las Vegas, having grown up here, but I didn't really know how to work that network at all. And so I went out and applied for jobs, and the best job, or the best paying job I could find, was basically following around a casino host at the Flamingo and begging people to join join the slot club, which was not really why I had gone to college. So it was about that time I was deciding, okay, I clearly have to go back to school. Do I go apply for law school or do I apply to the MBA program? And I ended up, it was really a toss up at that point. So I ended up taking the LSAT, getting into law school. And this was sort of the future that it sounded like. So I was working during the day and going to school part-time at night. And 2 years, so it's a 4-year program. 2 years into that 4-year program, one of the professors said, close your books. I'm going to tell you what your life will be like as a new lawyer. And all of my references, having grown up here in Las Vegas, for attorneys were those who either were named partners or who had their own practices. So I was sort of blissfully unaware of the new life, or the typical life of a new attorney, which doesn't so much resemble this, something more along the lines of this, maybe this, eventually this. And so I definitely felt like 2 years into this 4-year program, I was sort of in the back of the room, breathing into a paper bag and feeling like I am just going to have a very expensive backup plan in my law degree. And realizing that 2 years into the degree, I certainly can't turn back now. I may as well finish and try to figure out something else I want to do. And luckily, I only had to languish in that feeling of utter purgatory for a couple of months, because that's about the time that UNLV started pairing an MBA with a law degree, a hotel degree, and a dental degree. So I ran back to my home away from home, which was Beam Hall. And this is actually my photo, and it's telling that there is the ray of sunshine coming through, because it really was my saving grace. So I ran back to Beam Hall. I sort of almost physically grabbed Lisa Davis, who was the registrar for the MBA program, by the shoulders. And I said, how do I get into this program? And she said, well, you have to take another entrance exam, which is just what you want to hear after you've taken the LSAT. So I went in, took the GMAT, got exactly the score I needed, the minimum score I needed to get into school, and started in the MBA program. And so while I was in the MBA program, I was assigned one of our semester projects, or our semester project, excuse me, in our marketing class, was to design a marketing plan for one of the companies. The first company that we were offered, the marketing person who came to present to us about the company changed their business plan probably 4 times just during her 20-minute presentation. And I thought, well, if she can't focus on this for more than 20 minutes, I'm not going to spend a whole semester on it. And what's behind door number 2? And behind door number 2 was the Las Vegas monorail. And this was around 2005, when the train was like bursting into flames as it came out of the station, and pieces and parts were falling onto Paradise Road. So it was not exactly an easy choice, but I ended up going with the monorail because I had been working trade shows all through undergrad and law school. And there is a monorail station in the parking lot of the Las Vegas Convention Center that none of the show attendees seemed to be aware of, because they would wait in a 2.5-hour long cab line at the end of CES when they could get anywhere on the strip they wanted to go in 9 minutes using the monorail. So I focused my marketing plan around raising awareness of the monorail among convention attendees. And little did all of the presenters in this class know, but the executive team of the Las Vegas monorail attended our presentations. And not because I'm some brilliant, scripter of this marketing plan, or because it was some sort of genius, but probably because I didn't screen print the picture of the monorail with the flames coming out of the front of the train that ran on the front page of the RJ around that time. They had it screen printed onto their t-shirts, and they were pretty mortified when the executive team from the monorail company was there. At the end of the presentations, the president of the monorail offered me a job. He said, we really want you to come. We want to hire you to execute on this marketing plan. And so going back to the beginning of the story, kind of always wanting to have my own business and kind of be in charge of my own life, this was the opportunity I saw that I was going to take to start my own thing. So I said, rather than become an employee of yours, I'm going to start my own company and then I'll be a vendor, which is what I did. So I started this marketing company, and we implemented not the full plan because, of course, we ran into some roadblocks, but we began promoting the monorail among convention attendees. And that went on, all told, it went on for probably 3.5 years. But about 6 months into it, I was starting to be presented with opportunities that would have technically been a breach of some of these contracts that I had signed with the companies that I had been working conventions for. So I am now a new business owner finding myself in need of legal advice. So I'm a Las Vegas native. I called another Las Vegas native who was an attorney who'd been practicing here for like 20 years. And I said, here's my situation. I need an introduction to an attorney who can advise me on a non-compete. And so he basically sent me to the absolute wrong attorney. It was a little like getting sent to a podiatrist with a toothache. So he very clearly wasn't interested in helping me. He said, if you want to get in trouble, go ahead and violate the non-compete. And I said, well, I'm in your office because I know I could get in trouble. I'm trying to gauge whether it would be a calculated risk. I'm trying to determine whether it's a risk worth taking. And he simply repeated himself. If you want to get in trouble, go ahead and violate the non-compete, which is not necessarily something I wanted to hear. So I walked out of his office. I was very disillusioned, and I started calling everybody I knew who had small businesses. Who do you go to for legal advice? And without fail, it was, well, it's the attorney that helped me with my divorce, the attorney that helped my brother with his DUI, my sister's a paralegal in Florida. There didn't seem to be anybody who was really catering to the small business market here in the Valley. And let's also remember that this was the time that I started my company, which was probably the bottom of the recession, in one of the hardest hit communities in the entire country. And I'm starting a law firm serving small businesses. Most of my clients at that time were starting businesses out of necessity because they were getting laid off positions and the market unemployment was so high, there wasn't any other position for them to go to. So they were trying to turn their hobbies into livelihoods. So I suppose there's nowhere to go from there but up. So I ended up starting the law firm and growing it we're coming up on 12 years in business now. We have businesses of all sizes as clients, from, small mom and pop businesses, landscape service companies, to, multi-million dollar, air medical transport companies, or, it kind of runs the gamut. We've got people with restaurants, we've got people in retail, we've got physicians and other professionals. And so it's been really exciting, and I've kind of stumbled into it. And so going back to where I started, really not intending that any of this happened. I never wanted to be a lawyer when I grew up. Really going to law school was sort of, I was engaged to be married at the time, and he wanted to go to law school. And I thought it would be super romantic to study for the LSAT together. It wasn't. So getting to all of this, I definitely took that hard right or left or whatever it was at Albuquerque. But what I'm super excited was something that happened that Lynn mentioned in my introduction, is that I have worked my way up in the Vegas Chamber, and now, as probably the smallest business they've had represented in leadership, I'm going to be the chair of the organization, the board of trustees, next year, which is really crazy, because for a very long time, and I think many students get to this point, we are expected, to understand and know where we want to be when we're just graduated high school. And that is a very rare thing for people to know. And even if you believe 9 times out of 10, you will change so much over the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years that it may change. And so when you feel like you're standing here at the precipice of trying not to make a wrong turn at Albuquerque, realize that you're not alone. This is, there's a function of going with the flow. There's a function of having a plan, and then there's a function of going with the flow that you have to strike a balance between. And so if you feel like you're here and you're not really sure where you're going to go, and you're not really sure what you're going to do, it's okay. And so what I would suggest is that you just start somewhere. And some of the things that I wish I had done when I was very first starting in school is to follow somebody around. I didn't know what being a lawyer meant. I didn't even know what the life of a new lawyer was, which was like Suits, the TV show Suits, but not at all funny, until I got out and I started talking with my friends who were working at firms, and how miserable they were and how little client interaction they had. So you just want to start somewhere, and you want to get as close to that position and in that job as you possibly can. So if you can follow somebody around, I've on several occasions taken law students with me around town as I, go about my business so they can actually see what it's like. Because what they tell you in school is a drastic departure from what reality is, unfortunately. So it's really kind of a one step at a time thing. And getting to the point where you may need to make a change or you may need to pivot, like that night in, I think it was contracts class, and here's what your life is going to be like as a new lawyer. And you're going to have a senior partner who doesn't know your name and doesn't care. And you will not be able to see clients, and you're going to be relegated to the basement with a red stapler like Milton. It's being patient with yourself, and it's trying to figure out what your drivers are and pursuing what makes you happy. That whole follow your bliss thing sounds so overdone. It's almost as bad as live, love, laugh. But it really is true to figure out at your earliest opportunity what your drivers are. So for me, for example, my driver is autonomy. That second year in law school, when the professor said, here's what your life is going to be like as a new lawyer, I had zero autonomy in that scenario. And that's not why I had gone to school. And that's not why I was incurring all sorts of student loan debt. And that's not why I was continuing to go to school when I could have probably easily bartended and made more money. And so trying to figure out what your driver is and respecting that is really important. If your driver is money, fine. That's what you need to go for. If your driver is independence, if you have family, if you are looking for the ability to travel and flexibility, it's trying to figure out what gets you out of bed every morning and respecting it. Don't try to fight it, because it will always fight you back. And eventually you will run out of energy to fight it. And so that's sort of my story on my winding path, which the whole point of it is that it's not necessarily the wrong one. 9 times out of 10, the people I meet and I ask them, like when I was working trade shows, I was rubbing elbows and working alongside usually the executive suites of major companies like Motorola and Shufflemaster and Casio and Kenneth Cole. And I would ask the executive vice presidents and the CFOs and the CEOs, what did you want to be when you grew up? What is your degree in? And the vast majority of people were not working in the field that had anything to do with what they had gone to school for, which was comforting and terrifying all at the same time. But it's very much commonplace that committing to something today may not be necessarily what you're committing to in the future. And so that's kind of my quick story and my quick path. And today we've got a pretty great life. We love our clients. We love what we do. And we really help people realize their dreams. And so I am happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Gina. I wish I could fill your work at home space with applause. I feel like it's probably not that gratifying to do this and just be able to pat yourself on the back, but I will send you some virtual applause for sure. So thank you so much for that really excellent, overview and, detailed stories and all of that sort of stuff about your path and its sort of windy, non-linear nature. There were so many funny aspects there. So I hope other people were laughing along at home, all the wrong turns on the way to Albuquerque and the visual of sitting in the basement with a red stapler and all of that jazz. So definitely super appreciate that. So I do want to remind our audience, if you have any questions that you want me to ask Gina, just go ahead and drop them in the chat. But I do have a few that I want to jump in on just as we give our audience some time to think. So I'll start with one of our ever present and most favorite advice type questions. So if you could go back or sort of blast back to the past and give your freshman self some advice, what would you tell your freshman self, your freshman in college, coming to UNLV and, eager to take on the world and jump into all these new experiences? What advice would you give yourself?
I really wish I did not have the college experience really at all. And I really regret not having lived on campus or not having, rented an apartment with some roommates or something like that. And I was just this total bookworm, total nerd that studying was everything, getting, good grades was everything. And I wish my freshman self, my freshman undergrad self would have been able to let go a little bit of that and realize that it's okay to fail. And what's funny is that I hadn't learned that as a freshman or even when I graduated with undergrad, but I learned it in a big way my first semester of law school. So I spent my whole life kindergarten through, undergrad, being on the dean's list and straight A's and the valedictorian and graduating magna cum laude and from the honors college and all that. And I almost flunked out of law school my first semester. And I can blame it on the fact that you have to learn how to take exams in law school, and the class in which they teach you how to write those exams was an elective, and I didn't want to stick around for an elective after working all day. Whatever, neither here nor there. But I was horrified when I found out that I was on academic probation my first semester of law school. And it really was a point of reckoning for me. And at the time it didn't feel like it, but it was a huge gift, because then I could just let go of, my need to be, I have to be on law review and I have to, which wasn't really available to part-time students anyway. But to be able to let go of that and to know that making mistakes is okay, and that some of the most successful companies make it a point to fail and fail fast and learn from your mistakes. I was reading the side, I just got a new Dyson vacuum cleaner, and that's part of his motto. The guy that invented the cyclone technology for the vacuum cleaner is to fail and fail fast and learn from your mistakes, and to not be so wrapped up in those achievements. And probably, like I said in the presentation, is to try to find somebody who has the life you think you want, or has the career you think you want, and ask if you can follow them around and see if it really is what you want. Because too many people end up going to law school and they think it's this, glamorous, whether generationally, whether you're like a Matlock or you're an Ally McBeal or you're a, Harvey in Suits. It's usually not that in reality. And so it's making sure that you are truly doing your homework, that you're seeing it up close and personal for yourself, and making those decisions, again, to determine what drives you, and what will continue to make you happy.
For sure. I think you hit on so many really quality points, in that answer. How do we have the conversations with students where they're concerned about failing, and what does that mean, and helping them to understand and realize that failing or failing a class or being on probation or all of that sort of things doesn't mean you're a failure. And, having that conversation with them is really important. But I love what you talk about, this very Hollywoodized, glamorous image of what being a lawyer is like and all of that. So I guess I have a question spinning off from that. So, and you can touch on or take this in any direction you'd like, but what is one of the elements of being a lawyer that I guess us normal non-law folk don't even realize is part of your job? Or it could be something that you do now that you didn't realize would be part of your job.
I am a therapist in a lot of ways. Probably it may even be as much as I lawyer, I also am a therapist, which is really interesting, because part of, I started my practice working with businesses because I knew there was a need, and because I knew, especially in July of 2008, in the bottom of the recession, like this was a market that really needed help, and small businesses are the driver of the economy and all of those things. I also selfishly assumed that working with businesses would be less emotional than, say, being a family lawyer or being a criminal defense lawyer or being a prosecutor. And I have found that it's not necessarily the case, because people get just as emotional with their livelihoods, and especially if it's their own business, and it's really everything is riding on that, all the kids' tuition and all their, bills are being paid by these businesses. So I think what's most surprising, and I think you'll find it from many lawyers, if you ask many lawyers, they will also agree that a lot of what we do is therapy. There's a big line between what you can do legally and what is maybe the wise thing to do interpersonally or to preserve a relationship. And it's navigating those waters that they don't necessarily tell you about, nor do they really teach you how, which is always fun.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of us have these like very grandiose pictures of like what it means to be a lawyer. And, there's always those clickbait, BuzzFeed articles of like all the things that are part of someone's job or how it's shown on TV, but it's not really like that. And so it's always really interesting to sort of hear, the truth behind what occupations really are versus, Elle Woods and Legally Blonde, standing up and objecting in her pink suit. So it's always pretty interesting to hear people's, feedback on what that sort of looks like. So it sounds like your personal values and your background are a big, backbone of the work that you do. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those values are and how you found them to sort of outline and frame your work?
Well, I remember I had a client who was a financial advisor, and I thought, okay, at some point I'm going to need to be a big girl and like plan for retirement, because I don't have any, I'm not working for anybody. I need to figure this out. And so she asked me early on, and I had like 2 nickels to rub together. I was not coming in with any big checks. And I asked her for help, and she said, well, what are your drivers? And I looked at her like she had 2 heads. I go, what do you mean my drivers? Well, what gets you out of bed every morning? What motivates you to do what you are doing every day when it becomes the grind, when it becomes, not what it is on TV? And I really had to think about that. And that's where I came up with it being my autonomy. So, that is always kind of hovering in the background and making sure that I'm honest with myself about things I take on, and why I do, if I do have a bad week, like why I'm continuing to do this. And then the other values that we try to uphold in the firm are really born out of my own experience as a business owner, trying to find help, and looking for advice, and really getting, I mean, the attorney I saw who said, if you want to get in trouble, just go ahead and violate it. I mean, he clearly was like a $500 or $600 an hour attorney. This was 12 years ago. Actually longer ago than that, probably 2006. And he was very dismissive and very, I can't really think. I mean, I have other words for him, but maybe I'll just leave it with dismissive. And I was really, it felt very, this is going to be the most articulate I've been all day. It felt very bad for somebody who is in sort of an elevated position of, having more experience or having more knowledge in a particular area, being so dismissive of what I was trying to build to like fulfill my drivers. And it just felt very disrespectful and very icky. So we really try to, we do have clients that come in and sometimes they'll have ideas that that aren't doable or aren't legal or aren't wise to do, but we really, honor what people are trying to do and to see if we can be a value add, and that we can be accessible and that we can be a partner in what they're trying to accomplish. And I think there's a weird relationship between most people and attorneys, and every time we go to like a networking event, oh, thankfully I haven't needed you. And because the typical reaction to an attorney, or the typical assumption, is that you hire an attorney after something has hit the fan. It's not a preventive measure. And our challenge is that we work, kind of on a proactive basis. And it's really to educate our clients on what we do. So I guess going back to your original question, it's really, I guess sort of I project my own drivers onto my clients. So you're starting your own business because you want to be sort of in control of your life. Although we joke that entrepreneurs are the only people who work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40. And it's very true. But once it's yours and once it's something that you can do, it's having that autonomy, it's supporting those dreams and visions that somebody else has, and making sure that we're not getting in the way.
I think that's so true what you're saying, about being an entrepreneur. That I love that we're the only people who work 80 hours a week to avoid working 40. That's so funny. I haven't heard anybody say that, but from folks that we've talked to that are entrepreneurs, that's so true. And that actually leads nicely into another question I wanted to ask. So what advice do you have for folks that are, similarly trying to carve out their own path? They know that they see a lot of things out there that are interesting to them, and they're trying to piece and mesh them together and sort of, figure out what their passion is and how they can also use that to make a living. Like, what advice do you have for somebody who's, motivated by what it is you're saying, but can't quite see how to carve out a path that is also not linear?
I would say to talk to people who have done it. Go to a networking event. If you're still in school, like Vegas Young Professionals was a great place for me to start. And it was really, it's typically for people at least at the age of 21. But ask for introductions to people. say, call me. I'm interested in, I'm thinking of pursuing a finance degree, but I want to know what it's like. And then when you talk to somebody who's actually in the industry, and I'm even doing it today, where I will have a conversation with somebody who is in a business that I didn't know, or even people I've known for many years. And I ask them, what are the best and worst parts of their average day? Not like, oh, I don't like having to do tracking my hours and doing billing, or I really like working with clients. Like, no, what is the nitty gritty of the best and worst parts of your day? That's outside necessarily of what you do, not necessarily something that somebody would assume is part of your job. Like you were saying, that it's not necessarily all it's portrayed in the media, but to find those people and to talk to as many people as you can who are in a similar industry, because there are so many different approaches. Like law may be a different animal because there are so many different things you can do with a law degree, many of which are not even practicing law. But every single attorney you talk to is going to have a completely different practice area and a completely different approach to that practice area. I have like 6 friends who all are corporate attorneys, and we are all very different and would have very different stories to tell somebody who is interested in pursuing, what we're doing. Like to get to where I am, you're going to take a very different path than, my friend Chrisanne took or my friend John took. But it's talking to as many people who are actually doing it and asking those questions, and then figuring out what feels right to you and what, makes sense. If it's, trying to get all the straight A's and, the scholarships and, law review or something like that. Or if it's really working during the day and making sure you're getting the education. But you'll be able to, and the more you talk to people, and that's another thing that I wish I had done, is just talked to more people who are actually in it so that I could get a more accurate picture of what that life is like. Because quite honestly, most of the attorneys I know are not happy. And the only reason that I think I have escaped that sense of misery is because it is my own firm and because I work with the clients I want to work with. I luckily have the luxury to do so. But not to make assumptions. When you see people who are out there and it appears that their life is completely together, or that they have not struggled, or that they have not had to persevere through anything, is asking about those things, because 9 times out of 10 they actually have. They've had the struggles, and it may not be as obvious. They may not wear them on their sleeves, but hearing those stories, I think, makes it lend you some freedom in realizing that, again, the path is not necessarily going to be linear, but also there's lots of different ways to get to the same destination, and giving you ideas on how you can carve it out for yourself.
For sure. So it sounds like confidence, and believing in yourself is probably a key component of this. So do you have any strategies, for maybe dealing with naysayers or, opposition along your path? Because I'm sure when you're carving out, your own space, that there can be a lot of resistance, and whether that's from, potential competitors in the market or, friends or family or whatever. But I'm sure that you have to be prepared to deal with people that tell you what you're doing is a horrible idea. So do you have any thoughts on how you can either, combat that, or, get your head in the right space that you feel really confident about what it is that you're doing? If there's something you found that was particularly helpful for you, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So, the first thing that I would suggest is to stay the hell off social media, because I don't know why everybody has to be a hater on every single topic, but they're all haters, and it's not a good use of time or energy, and it really is bad emotionally. So stay off social media. Then I think the second thing that has been really helpful for me in just trying to get through not only like my day-to-day stuff, but to really kind of keep my eye on the prize and what does that prize look like? Because as I even say that, it doesn't really feel right. It's not really a prize. It's just continuing to carve out a lifestyle that I'm, happy with, and that affords me some freedom or whatever, is to keep a journal. And I know this is where the kind of the therapy comes in, but it's really helpful to kind of put down in writing and in perspective what you want your life to look like. And it doesn't have to be, I want to be a lawyer and I want to be on the 67th floor and I want to have a window office, like none of that. It's really more of the abstract, intangible things that mirror or that kind of go along with your drivers. So I want, like for me, I want to be able to travel. I want to, like, one of the goals when I talked with that financial advisor originally, she says, what are some of your goals? And I said, I want to be able to buy something even if it's not on sale. And she looked at me funny, and it sounded really silly, but it is something that really kind of still plays in today. And that was probably 10 years ago when I met her. And now I'm like, look at something and it's not on sale and I can still get it. Now I'm talking about like a hydro flask, not like a Bentley. But, you know, for me, those are the kinds of things that drive me. What is it? Do you want to be able to have the freedom? Do you want to have a situation where you can get up every morning and meditate, or go do yoga, or go on a hike, or whatever it is, to kind of paint the picture for yourself of what that looks like? And that's something that you keep to yourself and that you refer back to. And so in the face of all the naysayers, you can say, no, I have a plan and I'm going to get there. And it may not be the way you think I should get there. It may not be the way you got there, if that person is there. But this is the way I'm going to get there. And as long as you have a tool, and that's why I like the journal, because it's something that's usually private and it's something that you can be really honest in, and it helps to get it out of your brain and onto paper. And the key thing is that whether you're journaling for something like, you know, career goals, or whether it's you're going through an emotional time, or you have some sort of like major life event, is not to type your journal, is to handwrite it, because the connection between your brain and your hand as you handwrite it is so much stronger than if you're typing it. So it's sitting down with, you know, a journal and a pen or a pencil or whatever, and kind of getting all that out on paper. And I still do that to this day. So not so much about my life goals or what I'm trying to get to, but particularly the clog in my brain, like the monkey mind, if anybody does yoga, or just like I'll wake up in the middle of the night and my brain will just be on fast forward with all of what do I have to do the next day? What have I missed out on? What did I forget? What did I miss out? Like, you know, what do I have to give to the grocery store? All of this stuff. I do what's called a brain dump every Sunday. And this is an idea I stole from one of my clients, where I take a piece of paper. It doesn't even have to be a pretty journal. And you just write down, stream of consciousness style, everything that's in your brain. Get it out on paper so you know it's there. If you need to come back to it, you can. You don't even have to. Don't put it in anything pretty. Shred it if you need to. Like, it doesn't matter. The goal is to get it out of your brain and onto paper so that it clears your mind to focus on what you're supposed to focus on. And so that's been really helpful. And I've gotten into the habit, especially when the quarantine started. I was getting a lot of that monkey mind. So I started meditating every morning. And that has gone a really long way toward putting some distance between an event and my reaction to it, so that I'm not so emotional. So when a client calls and they're in a panic, my typical thing is to jump right into the panic with them. So now I manage to take a little distance, because they don't need me in the panic with them. That's not how I'm going to be of service. It's making sure that I can help be the more objective, you know, party in the situation, and help, you know, shed some light on it. So journaling, meditation, and putting something down that you can refer back to, that reminds you. It's like a way to remind you of why you're doing what you're doing in the midst of what everybody else might be saying.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, you know, about separating, you know, the reaction from the action, you know, of, you know, your clients coming to you and, you know, being in a panic, but realizing that, you know, for your health and their health and the health of your businesses and all of that, that you have to stay separate from that, or it's not going to result in positive outcomes for everybody. So that fact about the hand journaling, that's really interesting. I hadn't heard that before, that your brain recalls and processes things differently handwriting. So that's pretty interesting fun fact. You know, file that one away for the next time we all get called to play Jeopardy. For sure. So I have one final question, and this is probably, hopefully, the easiest one that we've done today. If you had the ability to start over and do it again, you knew the outcomes and you could anticipate the roadblocks and all of this stuff, would you do it again? And if you could do it again, are there any changes you would make? That's a big question. And maybe it's not the
That is
easiest
a big
one.
question. Yeah, that's definitely not the easiest one. Because I think, so you know, not to discount or take away from, like, I've got a great life. I love our clients. I love what we do. But there is definitely I envy people who don't have student loan debt or who are in jobs that they can leave at work, because like I have, so two of my good friends, actually they're husband and wife. The wife is the very first person I met when I walked into kindergarten here in Las Vegas. And so we had been friends almost all the way through middle school. And then we kind of went our separate ways during high school and college. And now she's back in Vegas and we're hanging out all the time. And she's an emergency room physician, which on its face, I would never have the stomach to do or never want to do. But there's something about her job that I really envy, is that she can really leave work at work and I can't. And so that is probably when I'm asked the question, would you do it all over again? That's a big thing that I never took into consideration, that I never knew. I mean, not even until recently did I know that that would even be something to take into consideration. That's never something that anybody said, hey, here's the career, like here's the income, the average income, here's your average schedule, here's your average amount of flexibility, your average number of vacation days, and whether or not you can leave work at work. But it's a big thing. And I have another friend who's a bartender, and I'm like, she's not stressing out over the gin and tonics she made 6 weeks ago, but I'm stressing out over the contract I drafted 6 weeks ago. Like, so I don't know. I guess the answer is, I don't know. I don't necessarily know that I would have. I usually try to talk people out of going to law school because I think the opportunity cost is too high. And I say that knowing full well that I love like what I do now. But I also don't have an answer. It's not like I'm looking around at something else and going, oh, I really think I should have done that. Although I do have a good friend that sells real estate and she seems far less stressed and makes way more money than I do. So, so that's a terrible answer to a question, was I'm not really sure.
Yeah, no, I appreciate the honesty. You know, it's always really hard to tackle sometimes those big picture questions like that. Like, think about all the segmented pieces. And even if you're, like you said, super happy and super content with where things are, like it's difficult, you know, to segment those out and, you know, debate whether a piece makes more sense or switching or swapping out for something else makes more sense. But I agree with you that real estate, they seem like they haven't made. So maybe next time we'll all make a lap and start doing that instead. Sell houses, bake cookies in somebody else's oven, have the house smell really great. You know, sounds like it could be really awesome.
Sounds like a pretty good gig.
Yeah.
And in that, you know, the point, going back to like the title of the whole presentation, is it's not a winding path. So to answer, you know, would you have done something different? Like there are so many major decisions that had to be made in order just to get here that were the opposite of the decision that I had made before, that I don't even know where I could interrupt it to go, okay, if I had it to do over again, I would have done this instead of that. You know, you'd have to like reverse out of all of those different things, but that's a tough one. I'll have to.
Yeah, that's
maybe
the
I'll journal
business
about
you need
that.
to get into, is building, you know, like a simulation where you can try out different paths, but there's like no consequences. That's what we need to start creating. I'll put that one on the list.
Yeah, write it down.
Yeah, right. Add it to the dream board. We'll make it happen. But awesome. So I wanted to take a minute just to wrap us up. And thank you again so much, Gina, for your time in connecting with all of us and providing, you know, your information, your insight, and your experience. Your perspective is amazing. And we so appreciate you being willing to share your time and all of this information with our students and with our Alumni Association.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Of course. So for folks that are watching, you can catch the recorded version of this on our YouTube channel. It will be up there as soon as we receive the recording. So if you're interested in rewatching this or sending it